I would like to share how true the statement made by Dr. Ambedkar that the intellectual class in India is simply another name for the Brahmin caste is, even in present-day India. To prove this, let's also recollect that Dr. Ambedkar said the intellectual class in any given country is also its most influential class, if not the governing class. So to prove this point as to how intellectual class is simply another name for the Brahmin caste, I'm going to pick a group which epitomizes the intersection of intellect, influence, and governance, and that would be the Supreme Court judges. I will also touch upon the judges who preside over the high courts. Just for those who don't know the Indian judiciary system, each state has a high court, which is its highest court in the state, but Supreme Court sits on top of all of them at the center, and that would be the apex court in India. So if you take, and if you all agree that Supreme Court judges would be the most influential people with the intellect and also semi-pseudo governance, we can see what their composition is and see how it is full of Brahmins. The Supreme Court consists of about 34 judges. Of these 34, 50% of them are Brahmins. Now, it helps to understand that there are only 3% Brahmins in India. So 3% Brahmins have a 15% share in the number of judges in Supreme Court. As to SCs and STs, untouchables and nomadic tribes, there are none, and they amount to 30%. So there's the distinction between how one group is absolutely not represented and one group, the Brahmins, have almost a monopoly. I mean, 50% is pretty close to being 51% and having a majority. So that's the composition of the Supreme Court. When we come down to the high courts, across all of India, across all the states, there are about 620 judges. Of these 620, the proportion is again still the same. 3% Brahmins have about 50% judges. That's their count. As to SCs and STs, untouchables and tribals, 30% of them have only 20 seats, which is a mere 3%. 30%, if it was to be proportionally taken into consideration, 30% of them should actually be having 200 judges there, not 20. So there's the distinction as to how we can show that the most influential, intellectual, and pseudo-governing class of people, a group, is still very heavily Brahminized. We can leave the argument there because this proves the point that Dr. Ambedkar was making, that intellectual class is simply another name for the Brahmins. But I do know that there will be a follow-up question stating that the reason SCs and STs don't get into these judicial roles is because of lack of merit. Because in every other body of government, executive body, legislature, and also educational system and jobs, there is a reservation quota, so SCs and STs can get in there. But lack of merit is the reason they claim that SCs and STs can't become judges because there is no reservation. To this, I call BS, because when given opportunities, everybody can develop merit. And the proof is in the pudding. These same Supreme Court judges, the constitution they pledge to uphold is written by Dr. Ambedkar, an untouchable. So there it is. That's not the case. Merit is not the case. But options to exercise said merit is actually the reason why you don't see SC and ST judges in the Supreme Court. And for further explanation, I'll go into the process of how Supreme Court judges are selected these days. These days, Supreme Court judges are selected by a collegium of other Supreme Court judges. There is no injunction, there is no input by the executive body to recommend a Supreme Court judge, which then gets ratified by the other Supreme Court judges and picked into the collegium. It's basically Supreme Court judges picking next Supreme Court judges. And this has become, this is what has been happening since 1993. Before that, a union cabinet, which is elected. I mean, even though it is a smaller group of the representatives of the people, it was still an elected body. People had some control as to who becomes the union cabinet, and they would recommend from high court judges or other prominent lawyers from the high court to the Supreme Court. But these days, that input by the cabinet is completely taken away. So it's basically judges selecting the next set of judges, and that's a problem because there is no way you can stop them if there is any nepotism or communalism or casteism in there. People have no way to stop that. So there's the problem wherein merit is not the problem. Not giving options to exercise that merit is the problem. I think that's where I want to leave that video.